Hello friends, I am JCM Berne and this is my channel. This is not an episode of book burning, this is something different. Today I am going to do a recap of Return of the Griffin, Book 2, or Turn 2, I should say that, it's my own nomenclature, and the Hybrid Helix. This is the direct sequel to Wistful Ascending, which I'm not going to show you because why would you watch? Don't watch this if you haven't read that book, wouldn't make any sense. This is a recap. What I'm doing here is I'm going to tell you everything I think you should have learned or gleaned from reading that book, in case you've already read it and want to recap, or in case you want to skip it and move on to Book 3, Blood Reunion. I think there are valid reasons you might want to do that. I'm not going to go into right here. So if you intend to read this book, this is not a review. This is not the good place to start. I'm going to spoil everything, basically. I'm going to drink a fat tire. Don't worry, it's a low carbon impact ale, which I'm sure means it is calorie free. There we go. So don't worry about my health because, like I said, carbon neutral. It's going to be healthy. I think that's how that works. If not, let me know in comments. I'll see. Okay, Return of the Griffin. Book takes place. I'm going to give you some. I'm not going to go in the order in which things are revealed in the book. Instead, I'm going to go in sort of a logical order of what you've learned. Again, so you can approach Blood Reunion or a later book with a refreshed memory of details you might have missed. So first, in this book, we're introduced to the concept of wizardry or sorcery. Some people, through mechanisms that aren't made clear in this book, can use their power to do more varied things, more than push-pull, gravity, the stuff we saw in Wistful Ascending. This isn't a surprise to like Rohan, so people clearly knew that this was a thing. That's it. Wizardry exists, and again, we don't get a ton of detail on how or what its limitations are in this book or for a while. Okay, the second layer of world building is this notion of shadow worlds. This notion that our whole universe is sort of a layer. Think of it like a sheet of paper and a stack of papers, and its existence is sort of shine onto this sheet from like a light or a source. Make of that what you will. This layer, so our world is real. Reality focuses on our layer of this stack, and some of it kind of bleeds through. So if you have something like a building or a mountain in our layer, it'll leave in lower layers sort of a shadow or an imprint of itself, things that exist but aren't quite the same. And as you go lower and lower, those imprints fade away. But what people can do is they can go up or down a layer, very small distance, and find a world that's very much like ours, but not exactly the same. And they can do something like walk through it to the next room through a wall that's not quite there because they've gone down far enough that the wall isn't really solid or the door isn't really solid. And they can come back to our layer, and it's just a power set, and it's a notion of these layers exist, which will matter in later books in other ways. We get some notion of some of the deep history of the overall world in Wistful Ascending. So first, as far as, and this is all from the point of view of the characters, what they know. So you can't assume that any of this is canonically true, but it's what is believed by the most knowledgeable characters present in these books. Life started in the oceans. No one is clear on which ocean, like which planet. Intelligent life arose. We don't know which type of sea life, right? It's intelligent life. Some of them developed sorcery, and one of those abilities is to create a portal or like a wormhole that connects one ocean from like Earth to another ocean on another planet, say, surrounding some star very far away. This happened, hundreds of millions of years ago. So very early in the geological history of this setting, we had ocean life traveling from planet to planet all through the galaxy, connecting all of these ecosystems. This is why all the different life forms basically use the same kinds of protein. They have the same kinds of DNA. They eat they can digest similar kinds of food. It's because microorganisms like plankton and larger organisms were moving from planet to planet. Plants would float through these portals. All the planets, they didn't evolve separately. At some point, whatever life evolved had to fight, against this predominant ecosystem. So the galaxy is in a way a single ecosystem spread across many planets. I mean, it's not exact. It's the same way, you know, on Earth. You know, you have islands with their own, but like things fall on the island, birds travel. Anyway, that's what happened. Two predominant groups of intelligent sea life arose: cephalopods, which are octopuses, nautili, but we don't get into these similar creatures, and I should say chondrichthyes, which are the shark family, but I just say megalodons because I'm lazy and I can't pronounce chondrichthyes properly. And so those are the two major empires that arose: giant sharks that used sorcery and were intelligent, giant octopi that used sorcery and were intelligent, and they fought each other for millions of years in battles. And they're both still around, the remnants of these ancient civilizations, many of them sleeping. The cephalopods specifically developed vampirism. They would eat one another's souls in order to gain extra power. Doing so made them unstable and a little bit insane, because when you absorb someone's soul, you get their power. You also get a fragment of their personality and their thoughts embedded in yours. You do that enough times, and eventually you've got too many thoughts going on in your head that aren't yours. And that leads to instability and sort of insanity. So they're, for the most part, sort of trying to sleep it off. That's not really working, but they've retreated into wherever. But they are still around somewhere. We know that after that, and then other things may have arose also that aren't mentioned in the book, so this isn't an exclusive history, but we know that dinosaur civilizations arose, including some dinosaurs that were very sort of humanoid in shape. We don't know exactly how that happened. Many of them were intelligent, also had developed sorcery. One of them, whose name is List, is still around. She's hundreds of millions of years old, and she hangs around on Earth protecting it from stuff like Doctor Who or something. Not bad. We know that mammals arose, and again, no one really is clear, at least no one you've met in these series is clear on where did humanoids first evolve, or where did they first arise, or how did they come to be. All these civilizations that have genetic engineering, that have magic that can manipulate life, this stuff is lost to history, to the characters. They don't know. Mammals arose. Okay. So we know that on Earth, let's focus on Earth a little bit more. We know cephalopods and sharks were fighting proxy wars through early human civilizations. We know there were civilized humans living in a place called Mu and living in a place called Atlantis. Basically, the Mu is linked to the remnants of the shark creatures, and Atlantis was linked to the cephalopods, and they fought wars. Both cities were destroyed, as we know, just the same as Atlantis and Mu were destroyed in our world in the early history. That's a joke. And we know their descendants are still around, like the children of Mu and the sons of Atlantis, or I might have that switched, are still hanging around like a secret society trying to reclaim their former glory and having a fight and trying to manipulate the world history and stuff. We don't get all the details, but we know that's happening. We know there's creatures that are related to the cephalopods. We've seen Ptolemeans before who seem related to these ancient cephalopods. We have on Earth, we know that there's a guy named Dr. Kraken, or Kraken, who is basically got a humanoid body and like an octopus head with like 4 tentacles, and he's an evil genius, and he's been, we don't know if he's an actual doctor or if it's like an honorary doctorate, and that's never really stated in the book, but he's been trying to destroy humanity for decades or centuries. Hasn't succeeded, obviously. Gods have been walking around on Earth, like people with amazing powers that have names like Poseidon and Ares and claim to be gods. Have been walking around Earth for a long time. They've been fighting those guys. And you don't need to know every character mentioned in this book. This book has a large cast, many of whom are only mentioned briefly because it's a superhero book, and there's a lot of heroes on Earth who get mentioned. Like someone will say, why don't we bring this guy in to help fight? And so there's a lot of names. I'm going to try to focus on the ones you should possibly remember, and we're not going to go through them all. The ones you don't need to remember, I'm not going to talk about as much. So there might be other gods walking around, but specifically Poseidon and Ares are worth remembering. There's a guy named Masamune walking around. Masamune, I'm not going to get into the actual person, that's another story. But in this book, he's a smith. He was known for creating like amazing weapons. We find out he looks exactly like Tolan from Wistful Ascending, the guy who made the frisbee for Rohan, and his clothes, the tailor on Wistful. They look like almost like identical twins or brothers, which is weird, right? Okay, I'm trying to make sure I do this in a sort of sensible order. We know Rohan was on Earth. Rohan was a bit of a kind of a mess up. Like, he was very powerful, but he had a temper, as we know. He lost it. There's a guy, he was fighting a guy named Brother Steel in a fight, like just a run-of-the-mill supervillain. He beat the guy, paralyzed him. The guy ended up killing himself. A lot of people feel like Rohan wasn't a great hero, or they kind of don't really want him coming back. He hasn't been back in 10 years. They don't really want him back because he kind of messed up when he was a teenager with superpowers running around. He messed up. He did some things he shouldn't have done. Okay. We get a little more detail about Hyperion. We know Hyperion, as mentioned in Wistful Ascending, was Earth's greatest hero, a hybrid like Rohan. He agreed to go fight on the Ring Gate. We don't know what that is yet. For the Ildrakh. As part of the treaty, he took all the hybrids with him to help to fight for the Ildrakh, to pledge allegiance and fight for in their armies in various places. In return, they gave some tech. Earth's been isolated from the Ildrakh. The Ildrakh problem, we're going to stay away from Earth. No one's going to go there. No one's going to tell them what to do, and they get some tech, but not much. Specifically, they get some gravity control, some carbon fixing, which is a machine that can basically take energy and take carbon dioxide from the air and suck in the carbon dioxide from the air and spit out like carbon-based objects like graphite rods or bucky tubes or whatever you can make with carbon, diamonds, right? So you can take carbon dioxide out of the air and crap out diamonds as long as you put in enough energy. And cheap solar panels, big thing. So Hyperion got this tech, formed a company called Hyperion Industries, whose goal was to basically transform the world with this technology because it has that potential. Gave control of it to the director, stern, very potent, and intelligent woman who happens to be Rohan's mom. He wanted to give it to someone who was both competent and knew the Ildrakh. She was married to one for years, right? So she knows not to trust them. She knows how they manipulate. He felt it was a good place to have her be the director. She's the director of Hyperion Industries. And what they do is they basically take, a big area with a lot of sun. They put down a few solar panels. They put down one of these carbon fixing machines, and they used to make more solar panels. And then they used to make more carbon fixing machines. And pretty soon they covered a huge swath of the Sahara Desert with this huge, like a plant that can, just absorb solar energy and like pump out like whatever you want to make out of carbon, and they built a city there, and they recruited a bunch of engineers to help them develop the technology, and they did it in the Sahara, specifically to try to keep any one nation or superpower from controlling this technology. They didn't want to do it in the U.S. or in China because the local government, they felt, would be too much access and try too hard to control them. They also support super teams. So there's this sort of league of super teams, kind of like the Avengers, called the Vanguard, and they include superheroes from all over, and they have branches in a lot of different places, kind of like the Avengers. If you're familiar with the Marvel Universe, and if you're not, I'm sorry, it's still like the Avengers. So the Hyperion Industry supports them, pays them salary, gives them a place to live, gives them medical care, and in return they defend Sahara City, for example. It's why it's remained independent, and they're and they make a huge amount of money, and they have all these water cleaning projects, and they basically have created enough of these facilities to reverse global warming by absorbing enough carbon dioxide out of the air. And they can take carbon dioxide out of the air. What else can you make out of carbon? Like, you can make gasoline. Take solar power, take carbon out of the air, make gasoline, send it to people. They can put it in their cars, they can burn it, they can drive around, take the carbon back out, right? You're basically using solar power, using artificial, hydrocarbons as your medium of energy transfer instead of having to make batteries with lithium dug by slaves. That's another story. Okay, so it is not publicly known that the director is related to Rohan, or the Griffin. Okay, that connection is a secret. Obviously, Hyperion knows, but it's not known to the public. Okay, so what happens in this? So that's the setup. So this is all we learn about what happened before the book starts. Start of the book. Amber, who is a female Caucasian hero who can manipulate time. She can go back in time, but she can speed it up, slow it down. She's like a speedster, like the Flash, but not nearly as potent as the Flash. She is an associate of a guy named Spiral, who's a martial artist, who they both know Rohan. They have known him in the past as the Griffin. They knew him before. They show up with List, remember that dinosaur wizardess, sorceress, very old, on Wistful. And they say, look, we have a problem. Giant sharks, and by giant I mean like 150 meters long and like 10,000 tons, with legs so they can walk on land like big dogs, have been invading Earth. They've wiped out huge chunks of the Pacific Rim. They're incredibly tough and powerful, and humanity is we're at a loss. We can't stop them. We tried. We dropped big nukes on them, but that may kill them. But then it also devastates the area around, and it also more come. So it's not a good long-term solution to the problem. We need Hyperion. We need him to come home. We need him to come back and help save the species. Hyperion's dead. So Rohan's like, hey, no sweat. Hyperion's dead, you got me. And then Rohan's like, oh, I'm gonna come save the day. People will forgive me for my past transgressions. Maybe my girlfriend will sleep with me again, my ex-girlfriend from Earth, I don't know. This sounds great. I know how to fight a war. Finally, this is something I know how to do. I'm good at this. I'm good at ending problems like this guy's coming and trying to kill everybody. So he goes, they kill one shark. They realize, they're digging through the corpse, that there's an object in its head, brain, spine, I forget, I think it's in its spine, that's sort of controlling it, which means that the sharks aren't really a problem, it's whoever made the sharks. So at first they thought these were descendants of the ancient shark species. Now we realize they might be sent not by ancient sharks, but by ancient cephalopods. So secret societies are kind of going back and forth and who they're supporting, who they're for, who they're against, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. They end up, Rohan makes some choices. He recruits a bunch of neo-Nazis with powers to help fight against the sharks. And Bright Angel, and we meet Rohan's ex-girlfriend from Earth, who's an African-American woman from Baltimore named Bright Angel. She has very powerful, very close to his level of power, or in the ballpark, where almost no one else on Earth is. She has this power called the Angelium. It's not clear what that is or how it works, but she can control light. She has very potent telekinesis. She's very tough. She forms these telekinetic wings that can slash things. There's 4 of them. She obviously gets really pissed at him for trying to make a deal with neo-Nazis to fight against the sharks. And he's like, well, end justifies the means. And she's like, no, they really don't. They have a big fight. They end up getting some decipede venom. Remember, decipedes are the big bugs from Toth 3, whose venom could eat through anything, presumably except for the decipede's own mouth, because that would be weird. But they use that to, they go into the shark, they plunge into its head, they put the decipede venom, destroys the implant. The shark is like, oh, I don't want to be here. This control mechanism's gone, and they send it back through this undersea portal back to wherever it came from, presumably pissed off the people who put a thing in its head and sent it to Earth to kill everybody. And after that, the sharks stop coming. And that is basically the story. During this, Rohan realizes that he really needs to make amends for what he did to Brother Steel. He sees some video footage of himself beating this poor guy nearly to death and says, this wasn't cool. There are people who think I did a bad thing and maybe they have a point. He agrees, I'm going to serve a prison sentence. You want to put me in jail for this? I'm going to go. Take me to court. I'll go. I'll stand my day in court. Even though you can't make me, I'm going to just do it of my own volition. Try to pay my debt to society kind of thing. Ends up in prison. From prison, Dr. Kraken, octopus-headed dude, ancient, villain from way back, kidnaps Rohan. And takes him and is torturing him and is drugging him and was really having a bad time. Garen, remember Iron Squid from Wistful Ascending, Marion Stone's assistant who wore the powered armor with gravity control powers. He is with Dr. Kraken. He's been granted powers of his own by some mechanism that Dr. Kraken understands. He's acting as Dr. Kraken's assistant, along with a bunch of big tentacled vampires that Dr. Kraken, we don't really know. Did he create them? Did he just associate with them? I don't think we have all the answers in this book. I do, but you don't. So Garen's there, and Rohan's all drugged and tortured and messy. He's like, dude, what I did to your people, I'm just sorry. I got nothing. I'm sorry. And so Garen kind of realized, look, Rohan's flawed, yes, but not a terrible guy. We shouldn't torture him to death. So he kind of surreptitiously lets Bright Angel know where Rohan is, and she comes and saves him. So at the end of the day, Rohan's life is saved by his former girlfriend. They have a big party and so forth. At the end, Bright Angel tells Rohan that yes, that they had a thing, but she's moved on, he's moved on, he's got his own life now. They're really not an item anymore. Wouldn't make sense for him to like come to Earth to live with her. She has her own business on Earth. She's not going to come live on a space station with him. They need to just be friends. So she lets him down easy. He's sad, but he understands. There's a bunch of other characters introduced in this. You don't need to remember them all. Who should you remember? You should remember Bright Angel. You should remember Amber. Amber, time controlling. She's a mysterious past. You should remember List. List is the dinosaur wizardess. You should remember Masamune, who's a smith. He makes powerful weapons, items, fabricator, engineer, whatever you want to call it. He'll show up later. Poseidon, god of the sea, big white beard, looks a lot like you'd expect him to look, likes to drink and likes to party a lot. You should remember the director, who happens to be Rohan's mother. So we haven't seen Rohan's father in the series as of yet. We've heard him alluded to. Rohan keeps saying he was like kind of a jerk, manipulative dude, but we don't get any details. Rohan's mom has a girlfriend, Carla. I don't think she's important, except, I'm sure she's important to Rohan's mom, but she's not important to you, the reader, or even really to the story, except in a very peripheral way. Sharks and cephalopods, and that might be the gist of it. There are other heroes around. There's a guy called Kid Lightning. He had electricity control powers. Overusing them damaged his own brain. He can't speak anymore, or when he does, he can only say his own name. He's further injured fighting the sharks. He's an older guy, so he's probably going to be put out to pasture. There is a woman who, I'm blanking on her name, but she can control people's emotions by projecting her emotional state through her aura. She can kind of superimpose it on other people to a certain extent. So if she's feeling like calm, she can extend her aura, and everyone else around her calms down a little bit. If she feels angry, same thing. There's a guy called the Green. He's got some power like Rohan's, but it seems to be continuously on. So he's in a rage, in mindless rage almost all the time. And he was a former scientist, developed this technology, didn't realize the downside, gave himself these abilities, but now he's an uncontrollable fighting monster. And they just let him live in the American Southwest in a big patch of like nowhere. Desert, no one can come there. He stays there. He stays inside. He's rational enough to like stay within his limits. But anyone comes there, he beats the crap out of it. And people just leave him food. They drop it from a helicopter and wave, and he's there. And if that reminds you of another a Marvel hero, it should. These are all mostly characters based on superheroes from stories. A lot of other characters are mentioned briefly. Again, you don't need to remember them all. The Otaku Force 5, giant robots. I'll talk about them one day because they were killed fighting the sharks. I'm trying to think of the others, and I'm not. It's the ones who aren't important, I'm not going to remember because they're not important. So that is the gist of what happens and what you learn in Return of the Griffin. And if you want to skip this book and move on to Blood Reunion, okay, you are free to do that. But I think this video will help that when you get to Blood Reunion, you will have a better understanding of where things stand. And of the reveals that you should have gotten from Return of the Griffin. This is them. At the end of the book, Rohan is basically going to move back to Wistful and resume his life as a Tochi. So he's not going to stay on Earth. He's like, I've moved on. Earth is great, but I need to be, among my own peeps. So he's decided to go back. I say too much. I know I should edit it out, but man, that takes some skill and some time. That's not going to happen. So I am JCM Berne. This has been a recap of Return of the Griffin, which is a book that follows Wistful Ascending. And if you read it and may have forgotten stuff, there you go. That was, I think, everything of importance that happened or that we learned in that text. So I hope this made some sense. I hope you found some value in this. If you have any comments about the book or about this video, which are really two distinct things, feel free to leave comments on the video.